Jesus, welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kevin.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to have you back on. It was great to catch up before we started recording, and let's just jump into it. We talked about how crazy the California market dynamics are currently with oversupply of cannabis, which is leading to price declines. And so yeah, man, tell me what you're seeing from your perspective and what your thoughts are on the whole situation.
Look, I think we saw a big oversupply that really started about 18 months, right? So everybody said, hey, this industry is a $12 billion industry in California. I think at the time, so there was heavy projections of the progress that the legal market would make over the traditional market as time went on, and those proved to not be accurate. Right? Why? Because of limited retail access and heavy taxation, which kind of put made it hard to compete. And so people were revved up. People had activated a bunch of square footage to support that growth, and then ultimately were disappointed that that oversupply let pricing very down. And it's been a very, very tough market for the last 18 months for most farmers like myself, where the price of cannabis was trading for much lower than the cost of production. And what we've seen is just a lot of folks that have unfortunately gone out of business. And what I am seeing now in this last 3 to 4 months is a correction, and a pretty dramatic correction now on price to the up. Because we've just lost too many farms. So there's been 18 million. We got to 82 million square feet of total cultivation square footage in the state.
Mm-hmm.
And that's now gone down by 18 million. So almost 25.
82 to 18.
No. 18 have come out, right?
Oh,
So
I see. Okay, excuse me. I was like, whoa, that's a dramatic drop. Okay.
yeah. So a drop of more than, pretty much 25%. And that's just what's reported. That's not the people that are still holding on to the license and are not planting or planting less. And then that also doesn't account for the folks that are not looking to renew. So for example, last month in March, 71% of the licenses that were up for renewal did not get renewed. So I don't know if that's the percentage that we expect going forward, but I mean, people are saying no more, right? Like because the capital markets have, at the same time gotten really complicated with everything with interest rates, all the talk of having a recession, and then the underperformance of a lot of the cannabis sector. There's not a lot of capital coming in. Everybody's still trying to get to a stage of profitability, and there's no easy answers.
Yeah. I mean, all those factors that you mentioned, I mean, it's hurt every sector, right? Every industry, but cannabis in particular, just because of the added, regulations that we see both at the state and federal level. And in California's case, the state and the municipality, right? The municipal level in those cases as well. So there's a lot of red tape. And you mentioned there's no more provisional licenses being given. So I mean, that means additional costs, right? And time to reactivate those licenses.
Very hard cost. I mean, look, I think the municipalities and the state said we're going to give everybody 5 years, and everybody said, hey, you know what? Let's start growing, and then as profits come in, we'll start doing a lot of these improvements that we need to do to get the site up to code. But those profits quickly dried up once we got to this point of saturation on flower, and so. And really the alternatives to raise the capital, either in a debt format or an equity format, also kind of came off the table. So for an average farm, the cost to get up to code on a property is somewhere between like 2.5 million to $5 million in most cases. So like, where's that money coming from? So there's about 7,500 licenses in the state. About 50% of those are provisional, and there are no more provisionals this year. So, that's another potential mass extinction event for cultivators, and if for anybody coming in, let's just say that there gets a gap gets created and the market gets, I'm sorry, short product. To now come in, you have to go through the whole annual license process and cost to then apply for an annual license. So you're not going to be able to activate that quickly through a provisional license. So, I don't know how we get to a good state of equilibrium. It seems like we're going from one extreme in oversupply to maybe one extreme in the near future of undersupply.
Mm-hmm. And what are you seeing? I mean, we talked about pricing, right? I mean, are you seeing any fluctuation or any upward movement in pricing at this point, particularly on the wholesale side?
I think in the wholesale side, bulk pounds in the last, I would say 90 days are up almost 70% from where they were. And look, that's still a far cry from, where bulk pounds started or where they were, 2 years ago, but it's definitely in the right direction. And now, pretty close to where people can at least break even on product.
And would you say we're on the path of that price kind of settling at this point? I mean, no one can predict the future, right? And we don't know where the economy is heading, but right for now, I mean, and
I actually see a situation where price will continue to increase in the wholesale market. So traditionally in cannabis, you have the worst pricing in the winter months, right? Because you have all the outdoor producers that come out once a year harvest. So there's a lot of product that hits or becomes available, call it late October, early November, and that lasts about, call it 4 months. And so where we have traditionally seen the price of cannabis almost go down 50% in those winter months with seasonality, the price has been climbing through those winter months. So come the summer, where really, the outdoor product's too old to bag because it's oxidized. I don't know that there will be enough flower or definitely not at the price point that there is today. I actually think that we're on our way to see pricing continue to climb.
And we're seeing consolidation, right? Obviously, with this all happening. And so what are dispensaries doing in terms of, when it comes to pricing? Like, are they trying to get discounts? I mean, what are you seeing at that level?
So that's the very, very interesting part. I mean, we're such a new industry, and I think what retailers have seen is just basically price drop and drop and drop and drop. And so now we're probably seeing the first time where dispensaries are probably going to be approached about price increases. And it's so foreign to what we've been living in cannabis. So how dispensaries react to that conversation is going to be very interesting. And the second part is that the dispensaries are also dealing with their own problems, meaning the change of excise tax collection going to retailers. So in the past, that responsibility was held by distributors, and that has now moved, the collection point has now moved to retail. So I think the first bill that dispensaries will have after that transition happened January 1st will be at the end of this month. And that's a bill that they've never had to pay, which is pretty substantial. So that was capital that, in a way was free money for a while for the dispensaries, especially if they like extended terms with the distributor, but it's now a pretty hard responsibility directly to the state. So I think most dispensaries now find themselves in, hey, where's that money going to come from? And then on top of that, if we've got brands saying, well, the price of bulk wholesale is now up, I have to raise my price. It's another scenario, which is going to be interesting how it plays out.
That's what's wild, right? That scenario you just talked about. I mean, you've got these brands that are having to pay more expense for more expensive flour at a wholesale price due to it going up, with less farms available that provide flour. So do you see that, the scarcity, like I think you touched on it, the flour could be a problem down the road where there's so much competition for the brands that are standing, the last ones standing to kind of get the product?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we see it now. It went from, when there was a glut of flour, people saying, hey, I'll take flour, I'll pay you when I get paid, and I'll take it in consignment. And like, there wasn't a lot of outlet for it because there was everything was clogged. Where now people are coming in and saying, hey, I'm willing to write you a check if I can secure the flour that you're going to produce next month. So I think people are already seeing it happen.
Right, right. So what does this mean for the market? I mean, where do we go from here? I know that's a loaded question, but
That is definitely a loaded question. And look, I think there does need to be healthier margins throughout the chain. I think it will put more pressure on some changes from the state and from the counties. We've also seen that, and maybe that's something I haven't mentioned. We have seen, which is, I think, very positive. The counties say we're not giving this industry an opportunity to thrive. Like,
that's a huge step, right? That there's
yeah,
acknowledgement. Yeah.
yeah, and so, for example, Monterey County, where we grow, completely eliminated the cultivation tax. We would have never thought that that would happen, or they've at least put a moratorium on it because they know, people are in kind of life support and it's pretty dire, and they made it so non-competitive. So I think now the right conversations are happening about, well, we've had a lot of operators go out of business. It's not necessarily because they're bad operators in many instances. It's because the rules of the game that were set are not really conducive.
Mm-hmm.
And
Capital
so
intensive. I mean, yeah.
yeah, in a industry where you can't pull capital from the traditional sources that any other industry can. So,
Right.
and so I think the right conversations are happening now in terms of what needs to happen for this industry to thrive. The industry has provided a lot of tax revenue for the different counties and municipalities, and I think they're starting to realize that they've kind of milked the cow to death, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I see positive changes happening as a result of that. It's sad that it's taken this much pain for the entire industry to get there, but I'm optimistic that positive changes are happening.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely got to look at those positive changes. And again, I mean, I'll reiterate, it is encouraging that there's acknowledgement from the elected officials to say, "Hey, we're not giving this industry a fair shot right out the gate, right?" And we are, primarily the reason or the detriment to why it's failing. So we need to revise. We need to rethink, what we're currently doing. So, and you touched on, or you mentioned the word survive, right? Like to kind of help these operators survive in this current climate and economic landscape. So let's touch on, dispensaries, brands, cultivators. We kind of break them out into three groups. And from your perspective, what would you say, what they can do to survive in this current situation? Let's start with dispensaries.
Yeah, I think with dispensaries, I mean, a lot of the revenue channels that they had in the past too have dried up because everybody was so focused on growth at all costs. Where, like, for example, brands would be happy to come and pay a shelf fee to be displayed at a brand because as long as it grew their top line, there was always a next round of capital to go get if they could just show that the brand was growing. That's not the current capital market. It's now about, are you profitable? And so I think dispensaries have to figure out, I think, a way to drive more traffic in. I think that there's an education component to go from why does product in the legal market, safer than product in the traditional market per se that has not gone through a COA testing. And I think it's about supporting brands that are going to be around and that have a mission and that have uh, and that resonate with their current base. I think all throughout the chain, people are looking at how to just be more efficient, how to do more with less, how to reduce cost. I mean, uh, nobody can afford to keep saying growth for growth's sake, regardless of profitability level. I think everybody in the space is much more worried about bottom line than top line nowadays, which is a drastic change of how things were maybe 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's touch on brands from your perspective. What can they do to survive?
I think it's gritty marketing, right? Like it's the days of we're going to throw a big party, we're going to spend $30,000, we're going to sponsor this event and pay it. Like everybody is cutting down on those costs. And what I see is uh, like purposeful marketing, right? Creating a community, creating a story. I mean, that really is what we're trying to achieve with Umo, which is our house brand, is really leaning on community.
Fiscal prudence, right? I mean,
Yeah.
being smart with your marketing dollars, because I mean, you can't afford to do that stuff anymore, right? You got to kind of keep things close and have ROI.
Yeah, and really everything we do now is very ROI based, right? So PADs cost money. Like, does it pencil out to have a PAD for this dispensary if they're buying $500? If a PAD costs, $1,000 to host, so it's looking at it as like who's a transactional relationship and who are our partners, right? Who are the retailer chains that are really invested in the growth of our brand and trying to work in unison to drive consumers.
Mm-hmm. Well, and last, let's talk about cultivators. What do you think that they can do to survive the current climate?
Man, and it's all throughout. It's efficiencies. I can tell you kind of how we've looked at things. We've looked at, how can we reduce our cost per pound, which really we do through automation, we do through efficiencies in labor, leveraging technology. So we realized like the impact of supplemental LED lighting. We went through our first round of adding supplemental light like a year and a half, 2 years ago. And so we've said today, like, look, it's not about activating more square footage. It's about creating higher quality and being able to produce like more with less. So we added a second round of supplemental LED. We've added automated equipment on the pre-roll side to bring our costs down and really the focus on yield at the same time. So if I look at what our grams per square foot were 3 years ago versus what they are today, like it's been a constant culture of getting better and better and better and more efficient harvest after harvest and monitoring those costs in a per gram approach.
Yeah, I mean, to just be positive about the whole thing, that's a good thing, right? I mean, that's a good practice to implement, especially like you said earlier, the marketing dollars were going to parties and getting people together. But when you can implement some fiscal prudence and be smart about your marketing dollars, I would imagine even after how bad it is, we're going to get out of this. It's going to be something that you may want to consider carrying on, right?
Yeah, and I think another big thing is that we've invested that's outside of infrastructure is on a commercial strategy. I think early on there was such an appetite for cannabis that people are like, if you grow it, they will come. And you just, if you were to ask people back then with 300, 400,000 square feet of cultivation, like, where's this all going to go to? They tell you, like, doesn't matter. Like, it'll quickly move. So people are knocking down
with the hemp industry too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And now you should only activate the square footage that you can sell through, either through your brand or through a white label relationship. Because if you're at the mercy of the bulk wholesale market, like you have no control over, where that product's going to land and if it's going to make you money. So I think we've invested a lot into our in-house brand to secure a stable sales channel. We've gone deeper with our B2B partners. I think today we're supporting 16 brands in the state. If you look at the top 100, most of the non-vertically integrated flower brands in that top 100 are brands that we support.
That's awesome, man. And so you talked about your current strategy. I would imagine that'll evolve. Like, what are you focused on, in the future?
We want to go very deep on the genetics. So we understand that if we support multiple brands, we need to have more differentiated genetic plans for each of the partners to avoid overlap. And I think genetics just evolve and are an enhancer of everything, right? Like, I think genetics play such a huge part in the overall quality of the final flower that we're going very deep with breeder partners to ensure that we have a world-class genetic plan into the future. And that's a little bit of it.
Nice. Well, I mean, Jesus, what didn't we touch on that you'd like to talk about, or if you want to leave the audience with some thoughts?
Look, I think that the industry's been through some pain, but it's going. It does seem to be right sizing now. I feel for the operators that have fought this fight and may not see it through the other end, but I think there is light at the end of the tunnel. We're building a massive industry here that's not going anywhere. And I think continuing to educate the general public and trying to drive progress, on the government side are things that'll benefit all of us.
Mm-hmm. Well said, my man. Well, I really enjoyed talking with you today. I'd love to have you on again as things hopefully, like you said, we get out of this tunnel. Hopefully it's sooner rather than later. But like you said, hang in there, right? And just stay focused and be diligent and implement that fiscal prudence as we talked about.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, thank you again, Jesus, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.